Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of Pashhammer. So today is another special day. I say it's a special day because we have our guest Chris Cousins on. But now, Chris, you've been on this show so many times that basically you're almost like, it's almost like your show. And I think at some point we probably will have to pay you some commission. But I will give you 50% of all the zero monies that we have earned so far. So at least you feel like you've contributed. How are you getting on, Chris? You doing all right?
Yeah, doing well so far. Looking forward to chatting through everyone's favourite topic, army composition restrictions.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's something that people have been talking a lot about recently. There's whispers in the nether that GW might be doing something, and there's other people putting out different sort of restrictions. I think we've reached a point right now where people want some sort of composition, or they want to play with slightly different rules, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So today is very exciting because we are launching Aussie Rules Comp 2.0. This is the second version of the comp pack that Chris and I put together. It has several restrictions that we think altogether make games of Warhammer in a competitive environment just a little bit more fun, a little bit less sort of gimmicky and unengaging, and just overall just a more pleasant experience for everybody. That's probably quite fair, you think?
Yeah, one thing that we're not really setting out to do is to sort of rebalance the game. We're not making bad units suddenly really good, and we're not making armies that aren't particularly competitive suddenly very strong. That's sort of beyond the scope of what our objective is, which is much more for the sort of average army that you play against in a competitive setting to be more fun and engaging to play with and against.
That's
the goal.
That's pretty much the goal. And one of the things that we stuck to throughout this whole project is basically no rules changes. So we didn't want to change any of the core rules, how things work in the game. The idea behind this is you should be able to take any sets of restrictions that you play here, take it to another event that isn't running these, and you don't need to change your you don't have to change any of the way that you sort of interact with any of the rules. We have changed some of the way that what things you can take in your army, and that's really the crunch of what this entails. So I think without any further ado, let's have a crack through it. So let's have a little look and see. And the very front page, I mean, it's literally just gives you an outline of what our thoughts are behind the comp pack, and really just outlining the fact that it isn't perfect. It's not in its final state. This is as good as we can get it to now. From here on, we are basically looking for feedback for people to run this and see what they think. We've put our contact details on there, the Discord contact details. You can contact us on this channel as well in case you want to give us any more feedback. Ideally, people take this forward and we get some real world scenarios there as well. So the document is split into three overall sections. There's the army composition, the comp, there's the scenarios and the scoring, and we'll go through them all in the different stages. The most exciting bit, I think people will want to know about the comp. What have we hammered and what have we done? Chris, do you want to go through the comp for us?
Yeah, just before we do as well, it's probably worth saying that I think that you can kind of pick and choose which parts of the overall set you use. We like all of them together. We think they work really nicely, but you could also just use the comp and play scenarios out of the book, or ignore the comp section and use the scenario setup, for example. We're not trying to be prescriptive and say this is the way to play, but rather give people some tools that they can use to sort of build their own best version of the game for them.
Yeah, exactly. It's essentially designed as a document that you can pull bits out of and create your own tournament pack. So if you're a buddying TO that's never run an event, you can look at this and go, I like some of this, I like some of that, I'm going to pull different bits out of it and then I'm going to create my own pack. That's essentially the design behind this whole document for you to use in your own events. Whichever parts you think work best, feel free to tweak them as and where you wish. This is the way that we think we'd quite like to play our games of Warhammer, but yours may differ, and that's that's totally fine. There's no restrictions on that as well. But there are some restrictions on some of the things you can take, or at least the things that we suggest. So go for it. What have we got?
So I guess the first thing to point out is that whilst we mostly think about the game with 2,000 points, we've tried to pitch this in a way that will scale to different points values. It works quite nicely if that value is divisible by 3. So like 1,800 points, 2,400 points, lots of options. But the key things that we have focused on, a lot of this is carryover from the first version. First, big picture line in the comp pack, no more than 33% of your points may be spent on characters.
And that's probably the most significant change, I think, of all of them. It's the one that most people have said has had the most positive change. Even just bringing those characters down to a little bit less than 50%, it makes a big difference to the overall look of the army. No longer can you have a fully tooled up Chaos Dragon Lord with, a level 4 with all the tricks as well. You have to compromise somewhere, and that's probably one of the most simplest and straightforward restrictions, but it's definitely one that makes a difference.
And the difference, as you say, is really visible because those points aren't on characters, they're on different units. It also means you can't pile all of those characters, 1,000 points of characters into a big bulky unit. So you end up with a lot more things on the table for people to fight over.
Yeah, and this is the same restriction that we had in the first version of this that we played at a few weeks ago when we held the event. We didn't change this at all. It seemed to work really well, and it's definitely something that we'll carry forward in version 2.
And the second line, still a carryover as well. No more than 33% of your points can be spent on units with the fly rule. And where there's a mounted character, you include the cost of the character as well as the mount that flies.
Exactly, and that's really just to stop overly mobile armies dominating any specific game. I think now with there being some fly items that restrict flying movement, that this might be more attractive. It won't be so much a restriction, but it is something that I think brings certain builds, especially maybe the sort of Bretonian Flying Circus and the Heil Flying Circus type lists a little bit down to something a bit more manageable. So yeah, definitely sensible.
And some of those get captured by the character restrictions anyway, but when you have Warp Fire Dragons and Pegasus Knights and Necro Sphinxes that you can take outside of that, this means that we're not going to end up with the situation we see at the moment where a lot of competitive armies have 1,200, 1,400 points of flyers that your poor non-flying opponents have to spend the whole game trying to catch.
Exactly, yeah. It definitely makes it more engaging not having to face that sort of list.
A controversial one next, which we've kept from the previous pack. No rare unit may be duplicated, including rare units that can turn up in other categories like Terrorgeists and Sisters of Avalon, depending on your general. We've added a caveat that once you get to big games, like 2,700 points or more, rare units may be duplicated once. Yeah,
and that makes sense. It's really just to keep in that essence that rare units are rare. You shouldn't see loads of them on the table, and there is inconsistency between different armies, where some armies can take lots and lots of really good rare units, sometimes in special, sometimes in core. And then other armies don't really have that option. So if you are able to take the rare unit in any other section, you're still only limited to one instance of that unit. But that's what about what if we just take an absolutely humongously massive unit, especially with the Sisters Star? Is there anything in place to limit that?
Yeah, so we have a restriction that no more than 25% of your total army unit strength can be in one unit. Like you'd calculate the unit strength in your army for the breakpoint scenario, you can't have more than 1/4 of that total in one unit. And that's a bit of an increase in the restriction or restrictiveness from the previous version. We've gone down from 1/3 to 1/4 to try and push those really big units, especially once you get a big unit with 2 or 3 characters.
Everything in it. Death Stars, basically. It is just limiting that sort of build because, again, it's a slightly unengaging build. Nobody really likes facing Death Stars. It's all eggs in one basket. It's not really the most exciting gameplay. So that's what we essentially try to limit is 1/4 of your army's unit strength. So you calculate the unit strength of everything that you have, and only up to 25% of that you can have in one unit, which means that if you have a huge block of goblins with short bows that you intend to have a poison banner on or something, you can only have a limited number of them and not an absolutely humongous unit. Or if you do, you're going to have to take 3 other absolutely huge massive units, in which case fair game. That's what it is.
And part of this as well is that we previously had some restrictions on the poison banners. We've taken those restrictions out, but in doing so kind of toned down the amount of models that you can put into one unit to benefit from them.
Yeah, that's right. So there are some restrictions that we've actually eased off from version 1, and we'll go through that further down. Hopefully you'll see the difference. So it's not all increasing, ratcheting up the composition. Some of it is actually reducing it as well, and that's all about trying to find the balance as to how to sort of make these armies overall a little bit less. Take the bite out of the worst army list of worst offenders.
And something else that we've tried to do is minimize the number of total lines of text in the composition.
Yeah.
So there's some fairly blunt instruments in here, but that's to keep things streamlined and straightforward.
That's it, yeah. And this is actually leads on to the next part, which has had a bit of an amendment from version 1, and it's to do with extremely common magic items. So what were the changes that we've done on this one?
So previously we had no items count as extremely common. Mm-hmm. We've now changed that a bit to say that only items that are one use only can count as extremely common.
That's right.
So your Dispel Scrolls are still extremely common, but your Spell Familiars are not.
Exactly, yeah, that's it. And it's really just to, it just means that there's a lot of items that are sort of really cheap. You've got your Favors of the Gods, you've got your Power Scrolls, your Dispel Scrolls, you've got all these little cheap items, and there isn't really a reason to limit them so much. However, there are some items which are extremely common that are probably a little bit abusable, like your Spell Familiars and bits and pieces like that really would like to see limited. So this is one of the reasons that this restriction exists.
Yeah. And there are some, like you mentioned, Favor of the Gods. To be honest, I wouldn't mind if that was still restricted.
That's fair. There is some discussion there to be had, to be honest.
But again, in keeping things simple, we like people being able to take Dispel Scrolls alongside other arcane items and that sort of thing. Yeah. And so, this is the sort of middle ground we've found at the moment.
Exactly, and that is all the sort of army-wide restrictions that affect everybody. The next 3 parts are really specific to certain armies, and again, this is to try and tone down the worst offenders, or what is the worst offenders that we think, in our opinion, based on our tournament experience, and it really to do with the top 3 sort of armies at the moment, or what we think are the top 3 armies or army builds. That's Bretonnians, Warriors of Chaos, and Tomb King. So it's a few specific restrictions that have come up on this one. Let's start off with the Bretonnians then.
Yeah, and just to add as well that this is because of the sorts of builds that would still be possible even given the other restrictions. Yeah. So we sort of looked at what you could do with just those restrictions and thought that these armies would get away with a little bit too much even after that.
Exactly, that's right.
And the first one is, again, a carryover, which is that the Green Knight and the Falconhorn are limited only to the Bretonnian Errantry Crusade list.
And to be honest, that is still a nasty army list. Like, I don't think it's a huge step down, but what it does is it takes away from the most obvious and most commonly seen use of these, which is basically the Green Knight appears in every flavor of Bretonnian list that I've seen, as does the Falconhorn. And the 2 more common ones, the Grand Army and the Exiles, are probably some of the stronger armies that are available at the moment. So there's no reason to sort of have them have all their cake and eat it as well. And this is one of the reasons we thought you sort of tweak that a little bit, just to take a few of the tools out. They're still very powerful, but maybe not quite as uninteractive as they were before.
Yep. And the second line is that the Infernal Puppet may not be taken in the Warriors of Chaos Grand Army list. So your Wolves of the Sea and your Heralds of Darkness can still take it, but in the straightforward list, no Infernal Puppet for you.
Yeah, everybody loves the puppet. Everybody loves facing against it, or maybe not. Maybe it's one of the items that probably people would like to see less of, and that again is another nod to try and sort of take it from the more commonly seen top tier army lists and make it available for the other ones, because Heralds of Darkness already has a slightly higher core tax that it has to pay, and Wolves of the Sea is a completely different army list that has its own sort of restrictions. So we thought it would be better just to keep that item specifically for that, and that's Warriors of Chaos for you.
And then finally, a new line of a text related to the Tomb King's Mortuary Cult. The Tomb King's Mortuary Cult may not take the Lore Familiar, are limited to 0 to 1 High Priest, and Ushabti taken as core may not take Great Bows.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is probably going to be the most controversial part. I think this is the one that we're going to get the most comments about, the most hate. The Mortuary Cult is an army that escaped our sort of gaze in the first version of this. Now, we got lucky with this in our last event, the event that we held with version 1 of Aussie Rules. Nobody took a list that abused that, but it was something that was commented on. It's feedback that was that we had from the players, and we thought it would be wise to sort of limit that. Now, they're very difficult army to sort of put restrictions on without changing any rules because of the innate nature of what they do. They're able to take wounds off constructs and swarms and basically boost their casting ability, and then they're able to bring those wounds back. So it's sort of like an easy way of constantly getting a casting bonus, and a pretty large casting bonus, which is very difficult to negate there. So we made that slightly less reliable. The Lore Familiar is no longer an option for the Mortuary Cult, and that's just to basically make them roll their spells out, so it's a little bit harder for them to build that sort of oppressive army build. The High Priest, limitation to 0 to 1 basically. You can still have a coven of level 2 priests that can support that. They can still get casting bonuses. There's still a really powerful themed army list, but you're not got the oppressive number of level 4s essentially in the army. And the last sort of restriction there is the Ushabtian core. Probably one of the best core options, I would say. Would you agree in terms of the amount that they offer? I mean, anybody, if I could take a Ushabti with Great Bows, I would happily take it.
Yeah, especially when one of the supposed drawbacks is having to take more core points.
Yeah.
But then you can very easily do that with a chunky unit of Ushabti with Great Bows and a big block of poison skeleton archers.
Yep.
A couple of level 4s with +8 to cast, Necrosphinx and a casket.
Yeah.
The resulting army looked pretty gross, and then the idea is that this will hopefully keep things a little more in check. It would have been nicer to just change the rules so that they couldn't cast with quite as large a bonus, but that would violate our main principle of not dabbling in direct rules changes.
Yeah, I agree, and that's probably one that we'll need to come back to in the future and see if there's any changes required again. Something that we're looking forward to hearing some feedback. So overall, that's it. That's all the composition changes. There's nothing else in the comp restriction points. That is section 1 of 3 done. Let's move on to the scenarios.
And this is building on what we did at Dragon's Grudge, which was to try out the Upon Shrouded Shores scenario from Games Workshop's narrative scenario set that they gave us a little while back. But we like the objectives that they used, but some of the other elements of that scenario are not super balanced for tournament games. One player deploys their whole army first. You know exactly who's going to be going first, and that doesn't quite suit what we're looking for in a kind of evenly matched game. Yeah,
and so essentially for the scenarios, we've sort of deconstructed the essence of the one that Games Workshop provided us, where it had sort of an objective that scored you a fair amount of points, which was called a major objective, and then a couple of objectives that score you some minor points, which we've called minor objectives respectively. And Games Workshop basically recommended you give out 150 points for those 2 objectives, which is something that we have included in this and basically copied across. You can tweak that whichever way you like. If you think it's a little bit too much, you can downsize that. The only thing you need to be aware of is the objective victory points that you have in the scenarios are directly linked to the scoring, as you'd imagine. So it's something that you'll need to adjust. If you're adjusting one, you'll need to adjust the other, so that obviously it's sort of consistent and relevant as well. Do you want to go through the scenarios, or roughly how they work, or what our recommendation is?
Yeah, so the objectives, you score points throughout the game. At the end of every player's turn, you score points for each objective you control, and there's a lot of points on offer. If you're playing a 2,000-point game, there's about as many points available for controlling objectives as there are for wiping out your opponent. So they do matter a lot. If you don't like objectives so much, as you said, Pash, you can kind of tone the points down a bit. And objectives are controlled, as with the Unseen Shores scenario, by the closest core unit with unit strength 10 or greater. within 6 of the objective. So people have been clamoring for core units of infantry to be good. They're still not good, but
they're better.
Here they have something really valuable to do, which is to control objectives and start ticking up victory points from potentially turn 1. So whilst we haven't done anything in our comp restrictions to incentivize people taking more units of sizable core, the scenarios do a good job of that, and that's part of why we think these work nicely together.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. And what we've done here is, rather than provide you with a specific template of here's scenario A, here's scenario B, what we've done is we've provided you with basically all the rules that we used in those scenarios, and let you decide how you want to put those pieces together, which gives you the most amount of the customization that you can have for your own events as well.
Yeah. So then once we've you know how the objectives work, then we've gone with 4 different ways to put those objectives on the table. One is to string some out across the center of the board if you're looking for a big scrap in the middle. Another one is to put a couple of objectives on each player's deployment line, so that you have a battle taking place across the whole tabletop. Then another option, which we didn't actually do at Dragon's Grudge, but is something that I got to do a lot in Lord of the Rings, is to actually control the placement of the objectives. So a couple of options for how to do that. One being to give each person a chance to place one big objective somewhere in the neutral zone between the armies, and the other one to put a minor objective in the neutral zone and one in their deployment zone. So a few different ways to set up either 2, 3, or 4 objectives to then fight over, and you can do that on pretty much any of the deployment maps from the rulebook. So if you're trying to play a game with these scenarios, you can just pick one of the ways to deploy the objectives, pick a deployment map from the rulebook, and you've got a scenario there.
And that's what we've done here. Basically, is we've recommended based on the deployments from the rulebook, we've recommended a different way that you can set up those objectives on those maps. Again, this is just our recommendation. This isn't something that you have to stick to, but it's just something that could work well. So essentially, you're using the deployments that you have in the rulebook without the specialist rules regarding, say, meeting engagement or anything like that, specifically just the way that you set up the maps, and then you're using these deployments, these objective deployments, as your sort of main scenario end goal, and that's how that's recommended. We do also mention that obviously you can play upon Shrouded Shores, specifically how it is out of the Games Workshop community article. What we did for our tournament is we made sure that everybody had a chance to be the attacker and the defender, and that way it sort of maintains a level of sort of fairness and balance, because we did find there was a small advantage perhaps to the defender in these scenarios, so you'd ideally have the opportunity to play both sides, so luck of the draw doesn't mean you suddenly pick up a lot of points in an early lead in an event as well.
One other thing just to mention on this as well is that some of the objective setups don't work quite as well with some of the deployment maps, and so I've tried to we added in here some suggestions for which deployment setups for objectives work the best with which of the maps. And it's basically, if you're placing objectives and you control where objectives go in the neutral zone, then you probably shouldn't be playing breakpoint and flank attack, which have a weirdly shaped neutral zone, and let you put objectives right in the back corner in a kind of awkward way.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the idea behind objectives on that one. So that's we've covered off the comp, we've covered off the objectives, we're down to the scoring section. And you'd think that scoring is pretty straightforward, but of course we know better, so that's why we fixed it for you. So there's different systems that you can have when it comes to scoring, or the ways you do scoring in a tournament. The one that's probably most common at the moment, and I think it comes from it was more prevalent in certain systems, is the win-loss draw system. It's definitely something that works with objectives quite well. Scenarios fall quite nicely into that. It's not the only system that's used out there, but it is one of the more common ones. The other option that you have is the victory points differential, or the total victory points, and essentially, it's how much points you can sort of claim in a tournament, and whoever has the highest wins, isn't it? That's essentially, it's just a case of hogging as many points as you can. And why that is different to other ones is you don't really, well, the victory points differential is different, but the total victory points, you don't really care about your units dying so much as long as they are able to sort of trade for more points. So that's quite a nifty way. And the third method is one that most people will probably be familiar with. It's a battle point system, often referred to as a 20-0 system. Ours is slightly different to that, but battle points essentially, for every differential of X, let's say 200 victory points, you will get one battle point. And most of the time you start off with a dead draw and you split all the battle points equally, and for each differential that you have, the more victory points you score against what your opponent scores, the more battle points you will get. And that's how it works.
It's probably worth pointing out as well that all of these different ways of working out scoring only really matters for tournament play, when you're trying to rank people on their performance over several games. Whereas if you're just playing a pickup game, you know who wins or loses based on the points you get in that game. But what we've tried to add in here, there are a couple of elements to this. One is some modifications to the way that victory points can be scored to make it easier to get points out of something like a giant dragon with triple saves. The other thing we've added as well is a suggested battle points table for tournament organizers who want to use something like that 20-0 system, or in our case, a 30-0 system.
A 30-0 system. Although you never get zero, so even if you've been completely humped and you've had the worst game possible, you will still get one pity point in this system.
Do you want to talk through the changes to victory point scoring?
Let's do that, because I think that's definitely worth something. It's something that if you play Warhammer just straight out of the book, it can have a bit of a detrimental effect when it comes to our units that are able to keep their points very well. So we'll go through the different points as they are listed here. Basically, any unit that's reduced to half or less of the starting unit strength is worth 50% of their cost. Pretty straightforward, easy enough to calculate. It's half or less, and you get half the points for it. If you're fleeing at the end of the game, you also get 50% of the victory points for that unit, and if you're both reduced to half or less and also fleeing at the end of the game, you're worth 75% of the total victory points. So it is cumulative in that sense there as well. There is a caveat for characters as well. So characters and single model units, so that includes things like a Necrosphinx, Warpfire, anything that War Machines, Chariots, lots and lots of things that have wounds on them. If they are reduced to half or less of their starting wounds, they are worth 50% of the victory points. So I think this is another one that's probably quite significant as well, because a lot of the time these models will be worth nothing unless they're dead, basically. So that's definitely, you'll see the difference in that. Again, also, it means that if you have left, a very tough Dragon Lord on one wound, you still get 50% of the points for that as well. So that's definitely worth fighting for. And then the other ones are probably a little bit more standard. Units that are destroyed or fled off the table, they're worth 100% of the victory points. If the general is destroyed or left the table, you gain an additional 100 bonus victory points. And the last bit is to do with standards. It's slightly different to what it is in the rulebook, and just awarding slightly less victory points than you would for a standard. So each standard that's captured is worth 25 bonus victory points, rather than the 50 that you'd get straight out the rulebook. The battle standard is still worth 100 bonus victory points, so that's that part really hasn't really changed. So hopefully these changes tweak how you are how you're able to get victory points within the game. You should be able to have higher scoring games. The last point there really is just about to remember the victory points for scenarios, because obviously those are cumulative and they make a big difference to your score. And then a little quick note about rounding up as well. And all this leads to a slightly different battle points table. Chris, do you want to take us through that and explain the reasoning behind it?
Yeah, so because the way we're suggesting potentially changing calculating victory points makes it easier to get more victory points, and because the scenario gives you objectives that are worth loads of victory points, the 20-0 systems of old, where if you win the game by a couple of thousand victory points, that's the best you can possibly do. That's not really the case under this system, and so we've got a suggested way to reflect the number of points available a little better, which is our patented 30-0 system or 29-1 system. Just that's sort of the way that the numbers broke out. So basically the idea is that depending on how many points you win the game by, how many victory points you win the game by, we've got a table to convert that into a number of battle points to award each player. So if you win the game by 1,000 points, you'll get 22 points and your opponent would get 8 points. They've lost the game, but they haven't lost it by all that much, given how many points are in play. And the more you win by, the more points you get, up to a total of 4,601 points for a maximum win, which is unachievable without the scenario points.
Yeah, I think that is, you shouldn't really see those sort of scores towards the top end there, because you would have to capture all the objective points and completely obliterate your opponent, get all the maximum points for the banners and the general and all the rest of that. So I suspect most people won't ever see the heady heights of 26, 27, 28, 29 points, but if you do achieve them, it's sort of like legendary status. So it's definitely something to strive for. And the whole idea behind this is basically you've always got something to play for. It does reward people who win the game more. So a person who has won all of the games at an event should win the event, depending on the amount of games that you have. But if they're all minor wins, literally just by 100 points or so, then it's probably not going to be enough. There might be somebody else who will leapfrog them. There's a difference of opinion on which system is best. Everybody has their own preference. This is just one version of that, and it's something that we thought would be worth considering. So give it a try, see what you think. We'd be more than happy to discuss it further.
And this very much fits in with the plan of having options for things within the pack that you can take or leave depending on your preferences. If you think a win-loss-draw system is the best way to go, just go with that. You can still use all the rest of the pack in the same way. If you don't like the battle points table here, change it, do what works for you. That's, I guess, the main thing that we want to emphasize is that this is meant to be a toolkit rather than a prescriptive way that you should be running events.
Definitely. And if you also want to add additional bits onto it, for example, using, there's other community projects out there that are trying to make legacy armies a little bit better. Square-based, they've done a Renegade pack. So you can use this with that. You can use it with OWL Renegade pack. You can use it with different systems. You can use it with your own homebrew one. This is really, it's sort of a pick and mix list of things that you can add on to make your own events better. And that's all it really is. Okay, so where do we go from here? What is the next steps? Chris, any thoughts or suggestions and ideas? Because I don't feel like we've quite finished it yet. This isn't it.
So the way I think we've seen these kinds of composition approaches work in previous editions of Warhammer has been that they evolve over time. We're really early in the game. We think that we're seeing signs that some kind of composition scenario restriction or intervention is needed to keep the game fresh and to keep the replayability high, especially for players who don't want every game to be dragons versus poison shooting blocks. So I guess the next things to do, if you're listening to this, give the pack a go. We're really keen to hear how that goes. If you're playing against your friends, maybe try some games with the scenarios, even if you don't want to use the comp, or use the comp even if you don't want to use the scenarios. If you're a TO and you're looking for playing something that's not just Warhammer out of the box, this is something we would be really thrilled to hear that you found useful. You could take the pack basically as it is, edit it. There are some optional bits in here. Just cut out the parts that you don't like. You could almost run this document as your tournament pack with some a little bit of chopping out where we've got sort of lists of options. You just need to pick your favorite.
Exactly.
But if you don't agree with some parts of it, or you'd like to do something that has your own stamp on it, please do take this as a starting point, or as an inspiration, or as a framework, and tailor what you're doing to suit you as the TO, or if you're using it with your friends, to suit you and your gaming group. Because the idea is that there's lots of different things that you can do with a framework like this, and the more that people try this and other versions that people are coming up without, the better an overall sort of setup will end up with.
Exactly. This pack will be available in the description here, so you feel free to click on it, download it, change it, do whatever you want with it, and then just come back and tell us. You can get in touch with us on Discord, you can get in touch with us on YouTube, you can stop us in the street and ask us questions. We will talk Warhammer at any time, day or night. But yeah, basically tell us what you think of it, tell us the bits that work, tell us the bits that don't quite work, tell us the things that we've missed, things that you think still need further work, or maybe we've gone too far on some of the bits. Hot reactions are always the most fun to read, but once you've actually played with it, that's when the real data sort of comes out. If you're wanting to host this for your event, let us know, especially once you've hosted it. Like, we are definitely keen for feedback. The reason there's a version 2 is because we've held an event with version 1, we got feedback from all the players, and now there's a version 2, and this is basically how it'll work going forward. We will keep updating it as and when necessary, as and when there's developments and when it needs an update. So we need you to tell us why we should change it, or if it works perfectly the way it is. The feedback that we've had so far has been really good, and I'm looking forward to seeing how much more we can come out of it. Anything else that we can say before you sign off, Chris?
Other than that, The Dwellers Below is another podcast that you might wish to have a listen to. Once or twice a year, we do in fact release an episode.
Yeah, well, you've already had one episode this year, so I reckon the second one must be coming out like real soon.
In 3 or 4 months, I'm sure.
Definitely. There's a link in below for Dwellers as well. Do give them a listen. They're a fantastic podcast YouTube channel that have been going since before the dawn of time. So definitely give them a shout. On that note, if you think this is worth a listen, please smash that like button, give us a subscribe, share it with your friends, or just give us a comment, even just to say, great episode, thanks very much, we really appreciate it. All of that helps, helps the YouTube algorithms, and it helps us climb up in the rankings and get noticed by other people. So thank you very much, everybody. If you have got to this so far, it's been a long episode, but I hope you found it useful, and hopefully we'll see you again next time. All the best. Cheers. Bye-bye.